acclaimed the 2022 Human Rights Awards. My name is Hans Campanella. I am your host for this evening. I would like to start off our individual traditional honours.
I'm just behind you.
You got it? Organise him?
Oh, he wanted to sit there, so it's actually fine.
Fine. Is he with his mum?
Pardon?
Is his mum here too?
Oh.
Or is he with
I
a
can't
support worker?
actually see.
Maybe he's with a support worker instead.
I'm assuming his mum would come though.
Yeah. I'll have to go say hi later.
Good evening, everyone. Please take your seats. A few housekeeping items before the ceremony commences. COVID remains an issue for all of us, so please feel free to wear a mask tonight. If you need masks, our ushers can assist. Our Auslan interpreters tonight are Belinda Roberts and Alyssa Blakeney. This event is also being live streamed and live captioned, and you can view the captions here in the venue or on the screen if you're joining us online. Please turn your mobiles to silent, but please feel free to use your phones throughout to share your experiences tonight on social media using hashtag #OzHumanRightsAwards. Nathan Moran, CEO of the Metropolitan Land Council, will now commence the ceremony with his welcome to country.
Bajuri Warrigal, Dian Gurung, Babana Gamarada, Gadigal Nura. As the CEO of Metro Local Aboriginal Land Council, the rep body for the place we gather on today, it's a great honour and privilege indeed to open tonight's 2022 Australian Human Rights Awards. To welcome you all to the UTS Great Hall, on behalf of Metro Land Council's board and members, I acknowledge firstly the language I open in, the Gadigal language. Love, respects always to Paddy Garang for her gift in providing Gadigal language to Lieutenant Dawes. The words I open in translate as good evening, women, youth, men, comrades, friends. We're here on Gadigal land. Indeed, I pay my love and respects and extend my honour to all First Nations who might be joining us on the World Wide Web. Again, it's a great honour as the CEO of the local land council. For our board and members, the subject's a dear one. Too deadly to all the nominees, to all the award winners, indeed to all those involved in tonight's event. The subject is a dear one to our mob. Even for myself personally, the chartering of rights, the calling for rights, the administration of rights, or the downright fighting for rights. The council I represent has that backdrop. We represent an area of resistance and rights from 1788, acknowledging Colby and Doringa as the leaders of the Gadigal at Ground Zero, what we now call Circular Quay, or what will always be Warriner to the Gadigal and local people. We represent 24 local government areas. We represent a huge area that indeed for us, from Wonnarua to Bidjigal. For the non-blackfellas, Kooris, Gooris and Murrays out there, that translates as Bankstown to Cessnock. Our backyard's been a place where human rights, rights for our people, rights for the community have been fought and won. I'm very proud to stand here, but and also say I need to declare a conflict of interest. I'm a former UTS law student. I probably hang out too much downstairs. If you're a local, you know where that place is. Through 1995 and 1996, I was studying straight law. And at that time, of course, what came about in the year I was joining to study was the passing of the Etico Mabo decision being translated into legislation. Well, little did I know that in November 1996, my study was interrupted. I got the phone call of phone calls, one from the grandfather. If anyone's got a grandfather out there, you may know the type of call. Son, get home. But I'm at work. I study. I'm living a life. No, I told you, get home. Click. What that was to tell me that in 1996, the state government of New South Wales had reached an agreement to declare native title, the first mainland native title decision. So I better quickly say apologies, Professor Mowbray, for being a tough student in your classes. But that rushed me home, straight into the middle of the first mainland native title decision. It wasn't all good, but it wasn't all bad. The reality was that my grandfather was calling me home because his pop had been named as an apical ancestor. Much love to me great-great-grandfather, George Possum Davis. Look up some of the notes about the martial courts in Kempsey. He did a few appearances. He was branded with an eviction order next to his name every time he left the reserve of Burnt Bridge, and he did it regularly. But certainly what he represents and what my community at Kempsey, New South Wales, where my mother is born, I'm a Thungati, I am a Biripi, was that resistance and rights wasn't just here where I work today. In fact, it's embedded in all First Nations people. We've got a proud backdrop of fighting for rights. Certainly acknowledging but that here on Gadigal land in 1903, they were part of establishing the first coloured association on earth. What a great act of defiance when we had the White Australia policy passed in 1900. But I'll go back to 1788 and acknowledge all of the mobs, be they what we know as Eora, the word for the people, or specifically whether they were Gadigal, Gamaragal or Gamayagal. The words Warra Warra was the first assertion of rights. It simply said, go away. Go, you're not welcome. That's the assertion of the right to refuse entry. It happened right then. I'm very proud to acknowledge that in 1836, a fella by the name of Boomeree, another Eora fella, stood in the courts, in the martial courts, and told him, I don't answer to your law. He was appearing for taking the life of another Eora. But what he was asserting, of course, was sovereignty, that he was already responsible to a sovereign nation, people, laws and systems. He was acknowledging he had his own law. So in 1836, it's in the martial courts law. It's there for everyone if you want to have a look. But certainly when I go back and say thereabouts in 1883, when the Protection Act was started, a great resistance started for our people. Yeah, we were fenced in. Yes, we were herded in. Yes, we were controlled. But the resistance started. And I want to acknowledge that in 1903, the Coloured Association had a man, Fred Maynard, as a founding member. Much love to the Wanneroo people. Those people, and particularly Uncle Fred, started standing in what was known as the Domain from 1910 to 1924. He stood actively calling for rights for Aboriginal people, for all our mobs, for us Kuris, Guris, Murris, Noongars, Nungas, Wongais, Yamajis, Arrantas, Pitnanjaras, Yankajaras, Yongus, Barmas and Palawas. He was calling for rights at what we know as the Domain today. That area, ironically, but not for our mob, it's the reality, that's the ceremonial ground of the Eora. He went there where everyone else used to stand up and call out and shout out. But he was calling for the rights of self-determination, the right to be free, the right for equity, the right to be treated equally. He was a key player and component in the 1924. So just in 18 months, we'll celebrate 100 years that at Surrey Hills or Gadigal land again, we set up the Aboriginal Progressive Association, which led to the 1938 Day of Mourning. And that's the conclusion that we put out the first 10-point plan on earth. We beat yous all again. We beat you to aerodynamics. We beat you to fishing, stargazing, whale watching. But I want to put it on the record. It was our people in 1938 that did a 10-point formal plan, such as the right to be oneself, the right to be represented, the right to have land or housing, rights to education, rights to employment, the right of the freedom to marry. Might sound tough today, but it certainly wasn't for our people and probably still remains so. But that charter that they put out still remains the charter we seek today. As a proud representative of Metro Land Council, you probably know more about us on ABC's 1970s documentaries that are being played at the moment. But for a fellow who was born in 1974, who has some uncles who are spearing themselves off push bikes into the riot squad, that's the reality of our life. I'm proud to be born in the 1970s, in a period where great rights and resistance was reaching a hiatus. I inherit the New South Wales Land Rights Act. I acknowledge the failure of the Commonwealth Government, call out both red and blue. You failed us, Labor and Liberal. We wanted national land rights, a national rep system since 1938. Don't do it again. And whether you're green or teal, remember, we have a right to be represented like anyone, just like they said in 1938. But in 1983, our old people, Kooris, Gooris and Murrays, converged into what's Macquarie Street. Rights and resistance, but diplomacy and guile. We didn't get our rights from asking for it or writing letters. Yes, we asked for it, and yes, we wrote letters. But we did a holistic plan of protest, letters, diplomacy, activism, and in some cases, swimming naked in the Parliament pool, whilst talking to the negotiators for land rights. Putting that out there, that we're all united on one thing. We have a right to be human. We are equal to all. And it doesn't matter that I was born a Goori or my children are born to Kooris or Murrays. We are equal human beings to everyone on earth. And in fact, we say we are definitely equal to anyone on earth. But for now, it's back to the Human Rights Awards. Too deadly, all you mob. Much respect to the board, the commissioners of the Human Rights Commission, the deadly work you do. But it's the consumers, it's the administrators, it's those people who work in the grassroots in it that do us all proud. Let's hope we can get more than an alliance of Aboriginal legal services and community legal services, of Aboriginal medical services and Medicare. There's still many more things that all us humans deserve, and I hope to be part of that. At least, hopefully, I'll see my children or grandchildren realise the ultimate right that we are equitable, fairly treated, and we can serve a rental termination notice if you don't agree to pay. But for now, too deadly, all you award winners, all you nominees, may you have a great night celebrating rights and continue that fight. We'll stand with you anytime. Yakai, we say.
What an incredibly powerful welcome to country tonight. Thank you so much. I am your host for this evening, Naz Campanella. I am the National Disability Affairs reporter at the ABC. I also have lived experience of disability. I am totally blind, and I also have a neurological condition called Charcot-Marie tooth. And because I am blind, I always start any event that I am hosting by giving a little audio description of myself, just for any of our blind or low vision community who are joining us tonight. I am a white woman in my mid-30s. I have a pink dress, white jacket, and dark brown shoulder-length hair. I too would like to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we are here on tonight, the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge and extend a warm welcome to any First Nations people joining us here in the room tonight or online, and also extend a warm welcome to people with lived experience of disability and all our folk from all different walks of life. Thank you for being here tonight. I am thrilled to be your MC for this evening, and it's extra exciting because tonight is the first in-person awards since 2019. So whether you're here tonight in the UTS Great Hall in Sydney or joining us online, it is fantastic to be welcoming you here tonight to this wonderful celebration of individuals and organisations who are doing fantastic work around human rights across our country. Before we go any further, I would like to please welcome to the stage UTS Vice-Chancellor Andrew Puffett, who is representing our generous host UTS for tonight, just to say a few words, please.
Thank you, Naz, and thank you also, Nathan, for the welcome to country. Let me also acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on whose lands our campus here stands. Pay respects to elders both past and present, acknowledging them as the custodians of knowledge for this place. I'd also like to affirm the commitment of UTS to continue our work with and for First Nations Australians to create a just and equitable society through our commitments and to reflect the Australia we want for our shared future. On behalf of the university, I'd like to welcome you all here. It's great to see so many people out for this really important event and a really important acknowledgement of terrific work. I'd also particularly like to call out distinguished Professor Larissa Behrendt, who's the orator tonight and the recipient of the 2021 Human Rights Medal. We're very proud to have Larissa as a member of our UTS community. She's a transformational leader. She's been the visionary behind UTS's Indigenous research and a real champion for what can be achieved if we commit to supporting people to do great work and sometimes to do it in unconventional ways. We're pleased tonight to host the Human Rights Awards on the campus. Universities have a fundamental role to play in shining the light on issues of inequity, injustice, and sometimes illegality. Across Australia, over 1 million students study at our universities at a formative time in their lives. So this is an important role for the future of our community. At UTS, we're committed to cultivating leaders who will transform the professions that they work in, whether that be in science and technology and engineering and mathematics, the health professions, law and business, or the creative industries, all areas that will shape the future of our economy and our country. In whatever areas our students pursue their career, we aim to instill in them a commitment to positive social impact, an awareness of the social, economic, and environmental issues facing our society, and a passion for making a difference in the world. Our graduates are powerful agents for change. If it's the case that education is the basis on which society progresses, then we recommit ourselves to ensuring that the power of education is harnessed to overcoming the abuses of human rights that divide, oppress, and suppress the values we hold close. For Indigenous Australians, this is particularly acute. Our work embedding Indigenous graduate attributes in all the courses to ensure that graduates have the professional capacity to work with and for Indigenous people is pioneering. And our commitment to ensuring that Indigenous education is for all Australians is unwavering. And we continue to work towards building Australia's first First Nations college that lifts again the focus on the leadership and self-determination needed to make long-term generational change towards a better Australia. Tonight, we honour those who are trailblazers in Australian human rights work in the areas of law, LGBTIQ+ communities, Indigenous rights, disability advocacy, and family violence. Each finalist in the awards is redefining the word hero, tackling critical issues and driving meaningful change. Congratulations and thanks to each of the finalists. Thank you for your courage.
Thank you, Professor Parfitt, for that welcome. Well, tonight is all about 19 incredible people and organisations and the communities they represent and serve. Technically, there are only 17 finalists. 2 of our finalists this year are duos. We have a brother and a sister and a mother and son. Tonight is also about International Human Rights Day. The Commission is thrilled that last year's Human Rights Medal winner, the truly inspirational, distinguished Professor Larissa Behrendt AO, will be delivering this year's Human Rights Day Oration as well. After that, we will be honouring those 19 finalists in the Human Rights Awards. In these sometimes challenging and uncertain times, it's people like these who inspire all of us to make a difference. You'll be hearing more about Professor Behrendt and our finalists throughout the night, and you can also read detailed information about all of them in your programs that you have here tonight. But of course, while the focus is on these finalists and the awards and these particular champions of human rights, it is important to acknowledge that tonight is also about all of you here in this room and online joining us, because you are all supporters, advocates, and allies for human rights. And you all deserve special thanks for supporting and being here tonight and really being here to showcase the greatness that these people and that we are all doing to advance the human rights of all Australians. One of these organisations is the Australian Human Rights Commission, which has hosted these awards since 1987. And I'd now like to ask for the President of the Commission, Emeritus Professor Rosalind Croucher AM, to welcome us all on behalf of the Commission tonight. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you, Naz, very much. Welcome, everyone, to the 2022 Human Rights Awards and the 2022 Human Rights Day Oration. Thank you, Nathan, for your wonderfully warm welcome to country. I would like to begin by adding my own acknowledgement of the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting this evening, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and especially those elders of the future, in whom reconciliation and building bridges and building this country anew so strongly depends. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all of those who are joining us online this evening, and similarly pay my respects to elders in your local neighbourhoods. And of course, to acknowledge all Indigenous guests joining us here this evening. Everyone here tonight is special. But of course, we have some very eminent guests, and forgive me for a moment just to single them out in some passing acknowledgements. But I don't want that to detract for 1 second from how special every one of you is to us and to each other today. UTS Vice-Chancellor, Professor Andrew Parfitt. UTS Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Professor Verity Firth. Distinguished Professor Larissa Behrendt, AO. Eminent reformist lawyer, jurist and patron of the Evatt Foundation, the Honourable Elizabeth Evatt, AC. Australian Information and Privacy Commissioner, Angeline Falk. Anti-Discrimination New South Wales President, Helen McKenzie. Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Pacific Regional Office, Deputy Regional Representative, Thomas Haneke. Caldor Centre for International Refugee Law founders, Andrew and Renata Caldor. Australian Human Rights Institute Director, Professor Justine Nolan. Human Rights Law Centre CEO, Caitlin Reiger. Public Interest Advocacy Centre CEO, Jonathan Hunya. Professor Edward Santo of UTS, one of our former commissioners as well. Kate Easterman, AMSC. Chanel Contos, our Young Persons Award winner of last year. And of course, the commissioners of the Australian Human Rights Commission, my colleagues, who will be welcoming to the stage the various people during the course of the evening, and will have the envelopes in which the names of the winners are kept. I'm delighted that the Commission is presenting these awards in person again after that 3-year hiatus due to the impact of the COVID pandemic, which hasn't finished yet. But we are here with joy in our hearts, love in the room to celebrate the fantastic achievements of everyone. We're also pleased to be presenting the awards in a new format that's more inclusive and accessible. This means that there are probably many of you here tonight who have never been to one of our awards ceremonies. So I'd particularly like to welcome you and thank you for coming, whether you're here at UTS or joining online. Every year, as Naz has told us, we have celebrated these awards since 1987 to celebrate human rights achievements. It's a chance to acknowledge, congratulate, and share the important work of organisations, businesses, and individuals across the nation. And every year, I'm overwhelmed, inspired, and greatly moved by the bravery, compassion, and dedication of the people and organisations we honour in this event. I also pay tribute to the everyday human rights heroes who are quietly making their own unique contributions to making our community more equitable, inclusive, and respectful. I hope you enjoy tonight's celebration and are inspired to make your own unique difference in the world. 2022 has been a big year for the Commission, and we've achieved some very significant outcomes. I would like to share just a handful of those across the diverse portfolios of my colleagues. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, June Oscar AO, continued her efforts to implement the recommendations of the Wiyana Yudangani report, or Women's Voices in the Bunaba language of June's country. These efforts included this year's National Women's Safety Forum, focused on addressing violence against women and children in First Nations communities, and will culminate next year with a major national summit to lay out the key elements of a new national approach to advancing the rights of First Nations women and girls. Our Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Kate Jenkins, had a historic outcome with the passage of the Respect at Work Bill through federal parliament just a few weeks ago, implementing recommendations from the Commission's Respect at Work report from the inquiry that Commissioner Jenkins led, which provides a blueprint for a preventative approach to workplace sexual harassment. The Commission now also has a new role in helping employers improve their approach to preventing workplace sexual harassment. Our Age Discrimination Commissioner, the Honourable Dr. Kay Patterson AO, continued to deepen relationships across the community sector to promote awareness about elder abuse, as well as the challenges facing older women at risk of homelessness, and to combat ageism and age discrimination in the workplace. Our Race Discrimination Commissioner, Chin Tan, continued with the development of Australia's first national anti-racism framework, including the launch this week of a scoping report for the framework's implementation. He also continued to oversee the rollout of new contributions in our compelling Racism, It Stops With Me campaign. Our Disability Discrimination Commissioner, Dr. Ben Gauntlet, launched our Includability Project to increase the employment opportunities for people with disability. He has also focused on efforts to improve housing design for people with disability. The National Children's Commissioner, Anne Hollands, has been committed to systems reform to improve child wellbeing and ensure that the voices of children and families inform the design of policy that is meant to help them. The current attention across the country on the need to reform Australia's approach to youth justice resonates with this approach. Our Human Rights Commissioner, Lorraine Finlay, undertook some major work in relation to Australia's obligations under the UN Convention Against Torture and our implementation of its optional protocol, including before the UN Committee Against Torture in Geneva just a few weeks ago to report on Australia's performance in relation to our treaty commitments. In addition, the work of the Commission in relation to our investigation and conciliation functions, a foundational plank in our statutory responsibilities, has increased substantially because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, the year 2021 to 22, just to give you an example, inquiries jumped by more than 50% to 23,200 inquiries, and complaints almost doubled to more than 3,700, the lion's share of which were complaints under the Disability Discrimination Act. This time last year, I spoke about the completion of the Commission's position paper on discrimination law reform, which we released on Human Rights Day as one of the major outputs of the Free and Equal project. The second major output, advancing the case for a Human Rights Act in Australia, will be released in February with a capstone report later in the year, pulling all the threads together, fulfilling my commitment that I expressed to you in 2018 on Human Rights Day. But before we get to next year, our last big event for the year is this one, and we're thrilled with the response we've had to this new format. Many thanks to all of you for coming tonight. We're also extremely grateful to our event partners LexisNexis, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the UTS Centre for Social Justice and Inclusion for their generous support. We greatly value the collaborations we have with our corporate and educational partners and look forward to expanding these into the future. Many thanks also to the UTS production team, including the many students who have volunteered their time to help out. I also record thanks to our independent judging panels who had the challenging and exciting task of selecting the finalists and award winners in our 4 categories tonight. A very special thanks also to the Commission's band of volunteers. With no budget and no dedicated staff to be able to deliver the event, these volunteers met regularly in their own time and on top of their other responsibilities because they believe in the event and the celebration of contributions to the advancement of human rights it reflects. I know how hard you all worked. You did good, as they say. Now, there is a reason that these awards are being held on this particular night, the eve of Human Rights Day. That's because tomorrow, the 10th of December, is World Human Rights Day, the day in 1948 that the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Declaration is a landmark document proclaiming the inalienable rights that everyone is entitled to as a human being, regardless of race, colour, religion, sex, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Nathan, in his warm welcome to country, spoke of the 10-point plan of 1938. I'll make sure that I acknowledge the 1938 10-point plan in conjunction with my recognition of Universal Human Rights Day that came 10 years later. Available in more than 500 languages, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the most translated document in the world. Setting aside a day to commemorate, educate, and reflect on the principles that form the Declaration means celebrating the rights we exercise every day as Australians and acknowledging that enjoying those rights carries with it the responsibility of promoting these rights for all people. To help mark this very important day for human rights here in Australia and across the world, we hold a Human Rights Oration, this year to be delivered by Larissa Behrendt. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, June Oscar, was very much looking forward to introducing Professor Behrendt, but Commissioner Oscar had to remain in Western Australia. So she sends her best wishes and has asked me to do the introduction instead. I've had the good fortune to know the very distinguished Professor Larissa Behrendt for many years. I'm proud and grateful to call her a colleague and a friend. I'm even prouder and more grateful for the incredible contributions that Larissa has made over the last 30 years to advancing the rights, health, safety, and culture of First Nations people and communities. Professor Behrendt is a shining example of what it takes to be a true champion of human rights, and being awarded last year's Human Rights Medal was a well-deserved honour. Tonight, Professor Behrendt will be delivering the 2022 Human Rights Day Oration. And no doubt she'll deliver it with the intelligence, fierceness and panache that has characterised both her remarkable advocacy and her stellar career. Professor Behrendt is currently Director of Research at the Jumbunna Institute of Indigenous Education and Research right here at UTS. In addition to being an acclaimed legal academic who has published numerous textbooks on Indigenous legal issues, Professor Behrendt is an award-winning novelist and filmmaker, as well as the host of Speaking Out on ABC Radio, where she explores politics, arts, and culture from a range of Indigenous perspectives. I can't wait to hear this extraordinary woman in what she has to say tonight. So will you please join with me in welcoming distinguished Professor Larissa Behrendt.
Thank you very much. I'd like to join in paying my respects to Gadigal and the elders who've kept knowledge on this country and shared so generously this unceded land, and acknowledge Nathan's leadership in the space in this community that I've been so lucky to live in, and also acknowledge the cultural leadership of our elder in residence, Auntie Glendra Stubbs. Before I start, I'd like to thank the Commission for the honour of the 2021 Human Rights Medal. The award reflects a long-term effort, but all of you working in human rights will know that it is a team sport. So it's not just for me, but for my many dedicated and passionate colleagues. And so I wanted to acknowledge that I truly do share this honour with the extraordinary team at Jumbunna Research, including those who have started the research unit with me, Craig Longman, Jason DeSantolo and Paddy Gibson, and also the current team headed by our incoming director, Lyndon Coombs. And I also want to acknowledge those leading the legal reform within the unit, including Alison Whitaker, Latoya Rule and Chris Caneen. Jumbunna has been strengthened by Paul Gray's leadership in our child protection work and by Daryl Rigney's work in our nation building work. It's a big team, and I can't name everyone, but each of them stands with me in receiving the award. I want to also acknowledge our outgoing PVC Indigenous Leadership and Engagement, Michael McDaniel, and our acting PVC, Robin Quiggin, who have unquestioningly supported our work. And we couldn't do what we do without the support and leadership of UTS. And I would like to specifically acknowledge Vice-Chancellor Andrew Parfitt, who has been one of our greatest champions and who has deeply appreciated the importance of our community-led work and advocacy. But most of all, a human rights award like this belongs to the First Nations people and community who have given us the privilege of working with them and beside them, who've shown the most bravery and who have had the most at stake in standing up against human rights violations. So this medal should be seen as recognition of their leadership and determination to change the system. Usually I put my notes together for a speech like this at the last moment. I hate public speaking, so I try and put it off until it's impossible to no longer think about it. But this time I started earlier. I was particularly motivated. I started writing after attending the memorial service in Adelaide for 15-year-old Cassius Turvey. I wrote with sorrow for the reminder that we live in a country where you can be killed simply being Black, and lamenting the message this senseless, hateful killing sends to our young people. The pain felt by a mob around the country was exacerbated by a comment by the Western Australian Police Commissioner describing the attack as being a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I was angered by the unreflective ignorance that reinforced that there is no place that is safe to be a Black person in Australia. It was the same week that there was a media story about the treatment of young people incarcerated within Western Australia's Banksia Hill Juvenile Detention Centre. Those of us working within the sector were long aware of the abuses there, and it was reminiscent of what had emerged from the Dondale Youth Detention Centre, where treatment of young people, of children in detention, included being restrained, kept naked, being sprayed with tear gas and with water, being kept in cells with no running water, no air conditioning, no fans, and no direct supply of air. It was a week when there was a reminder that the justice system of this country often fails to treat offenders, even if they are children, humanely, and at the same time offers little to no justice for First Nations victims of crime. Another week to be counted among so many when people came out in force to protest and to stand in solidarity for a death that shouldn't have happened. Tonight, I'd like to reflect on what human rights really means for First Nations people in Australia, particularly in relation to the criminal justice and child protection systems. And I want to challenge those organisations and individuals who advocate for human rights to also reflect on what is needed for real and impactful reform, to call for our human rights advocates to be brave and visible, to speak out not when it's easy, but when it's hard. The Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody in 1991 still stands today as the most comprehensive catalogue for needed reform across the criminal justice and wider legal system. Its 339 recommendations included imprisonment as a last resort, improved training across the criminal justice system, improved health services, better education of the broader community, and the need for the guiding principle of self-determination. The recommendations of the Royal Commission are echoed in the coronial findings in individual cases of subsequent deaths in custody, particularly about training and reform of police or custodial procedures. I would assert that every death in custody that occurs due to a failure to implement the recommendations of the Royal Commission is a preventable death. For me, the death of 22-year-old Ms. Du in 2014 is an example of that tragedy. There was her young age, the fact that she was a victim of domestic violence when the police arrived at her residence and then decided to arrest her for non-payment of fines, the failure to take seriously her cries for help due to severe pain whilst in custody in the South Hedland lockup, the failure of medical staff to properly examine her on the 2 occasions she was taken to hospital. She was dead on arrival on the 3rd visit, in which she was still handcuffed, and the overall lack of dignity in the way she was treated. The cause of Ms. Du's pain that remained undiagnosed was later determined to be pneumonia and sepsis from broken ribs, an injury sustained 3 months earlier, completely treatable, a death completely avoidable. Ms. Du's deaths could have been avoided if Western Australia did not lock people up for non-payment of fines. It could have been avoided if police officers treated her in the way a victim of domestic violence should be supported. It would have been avoided if Ms. Du's cries for help due to her pain had been taken seriously, and it would have been avoided if the medical staff had taken time to physically examine her. The facts of Ms. Du's death bear a close resemblance to 6 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women whose deaths were investigated as part of the Royal Commission. These included the cases of Nita Blanket, who was refused medical attention while on remand for driving offences, and Muriel Binks, whose calls for medical attention went unnoticed while in custody for non-payment of $30 in fines. The Royal Commission recommended that imprisonment not be used as a punishment for non-payment of fines, which is often simply a punishment for poverty. It also recommended that public order offences, including drunkenness, not carry punishments of incarceration. In 2017, Auntie Tanya Day fell and hit her head in a cell in Castlemaine after being arrested for public drunkenness. She was left fatally injured on the floor for 3 hours, a preventable death, and her family powerfully and successfully advocated for the law reform in Victoria that saw the government undertake to decriminalise public drunkenness, no doubt preventing more deaths in custody along the same line. As the number of Aboriginal children in juvenile detention has grown, so too has the number of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care. While making up only 6% of all children in Australia, today Indigenous children make up 37% of all children in out-of-home care. And despite the Aboriginal child placement principles, there is also a decrease in the percentage of children who are being removed from their families and being placed with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander family. Child protection continues to be a system that works against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families. It is a system that equates poverty with neglect, is rife with cultural bias, has little investment in prevention and reunification, but has a bureaucracy bent on keeping Aboriginal children in out-of-home care. There is a much higher chance that children in out-of-home care will end up in the criminal justice system. Of the children in the Dondale Detention Centre at the time of the investigation and the Royal Commission, 60% were in out-of-home or state care. So what do we do to start to truly implement change? And we need to start with implementing the blueprints of the recommendations of the Royal Commission and the Bringing Them Home report. First and most fundamentally, First Nations community-controlled organisations must be empowered and genuinely supported. 50 years ago, not far from here in Redfern, the first Aboriginal legal service was created, one of our first community-controlled organisations. It was driven by an understanding that the system was oppressing Indigenous people, that it was wielded unfairly and to suppress, often violently. It was a response to over-policing, over-incarceration, and a response to too many suspicious deaths in police custody. Successive Conservative governments have gutted our Aboriginal legal services, but when funding has been restored, it has never been to the same levels. Over time, the funding of these services has been eroded in real terms. We will not close the gap on over-representation in the criminal justice system until our legal services are properly funded. It is humbling in the work we do at Jumbana when we have partnered with Aboriginal legal services, especially with VALS and ALS New South Wales ACT, to see how much they do on so little. This underfunding is more absurd when one looks at the evidence that shows that policy and programs work best when they are Indigenous community controlled and led. We see this impact of the sector up close when we work with the community-controlled organisations working in child protection, particularly with SNAKE and its Family Matters campaign. And we see it up close with the work of the community-controlled health organisations. Self-determination was the key and first recommendation of both the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody and the Bringing Them Home report. In its true form, it means the greatest transfer of decision-making, policy development, program design and delivery to Indigenous people, and it speaks to the role played by community-controlled organisations. It is not an abstract idea, it works. When strategy rests in Aboriginal hands, it better reflects the interests, values, visions and concerns of the Indigenous group that will be affected and not those of non-Indigenous government bureaucrats, funders or other external bodies. The focus is on what community members think is important and what they know works. Such services are better placed to find the people who fall through the cracks, to actively bring people in through the doors, to work across agencies through informal networks and understand community dynamics and the appropriate cultural leadership. Self-determination has been proven to work in health. Take as evidence the work done by the Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations in rolling out COVID information to communities across the country well ahead of any government programs. And self-determination offers the best strategy in child protection. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services need to be resourced to work similarly in justice. We need a strong, properly supported, empowered, self-determining First Nations community-controlled sector to see the changes needed. Secondly, public policy must be evidence-based and the siren call of popularism must be confronted. We know that tough on crime strategies, so popular with state and territory governments, are incompatible with reducing over-representation of First Nations people in the criminal justice system. This is particularly so in relation to reforms to bail legislation that limit judicial discretion and inevitably result in increased prison populations due to the increased number of people on remand. For example, including the lack of a permanent address, in other words, homelessness, as a factor that gives rise to a presumption against bail, sees an increase in incarceration rates. Mandatory sentencing has a similar effect. The reality of tough on crime policies must be called out. It has to be challenged, and human rights advocates and voices have to be heard clearly within the public debate. A clear example of this is the campaign to raise the age of criminal responsibility to 14, not to 12, to 14. And I want to acknowledge the work of the Raise the Age campaign and Change the Record, who have lobbied tirelessly for this important policy change that would see the number of our young people in prison drastically reduce and us forced to find better ways to deal with antisocial behaviour in young people. Over my time working in this space, it has been the work of these grassroots community-led campaigns, like Raise the Age, like Family Matters, that have been the most important and inspiring agents of change. I think of the work done by the Barraville families who are still working after over 30 years for justice for the murders of Colleen Walker Craig, Evelyn Greenup and Clinton Speedy Duro. They continue to advocate for changes to the system that will see charges brought against a suspect in these murders. They have changed laws and fought a David and Goliath battle against the legal profession, including at times the Bar Association and the Law Society, for legal reform that would be a pathway to them getting their day in court. And I think of advocates like Karen Robinson-Iles, whose advocacy for others now also includes her taking on the Queensland and New South Wales police forces for failure to properly investigate the violent crimes perpetrated against her as a child. And she is not just seeking justice for herself, she is seeking to ensure that police are judged against a duty of care and a minimum duty to investigate child sex crimes. And I think of the work of people like Auntie Josie Crawshaw with their campaigning to close the Dondale Youth Detention Centre. I've observed that the clients and communities that we've had the privilege to work with who have suffered injustice have fought for justice for their loved ones, but also to make sure that what has happened to them does not happen to others. And they have done that while being largely silenced and marginalised by the system. That is why the attack on the right to protest is an insidious one. Protest is a basic freedom within a healthy democracy. The act of peaceful protest is an important mechanism for drawing attention to injustice and a strategy in the process of advocating for law reform. It is a way for the marginalised who the system is silencing to sharpen their message. We cannot hope for change if we are cutting off one of the key ways to agitate for it. And it is here that I wish to make my third point on how real change can be achieved. The responsibility of those committed to human rights to raise their voice when issues are difficult, when public opinion is not on your side, and when it is easy to be muted. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that in the end, it's not the words of our enemies that we will remember, but the silence of our friends. And I've thought about that often, this silence of our friends. At no time have I felt so let down by our allies in the human rights space than when they were silent as the federal government repealed the Racial Discrimination Act in rolling out the Northern Territory intervention. If a policy can only be implemented by repealing the Racial Discrimination Act, if it can only be implemented by being racially discriminatory, then it is time for voices to be heard, to question the reasons, to demand the evidence, and insist that the First Nations people being subjected to this discrimination be listened to. It was a time of deafening silence to both the Howard government and then, to its shame, the Rudd government and their same policies in 2008 under the Stronger Futures legislation. Some placed the fear of putting the government offside or risking losing public funding, or dare I say hopes of personal advancement, ahead of the fundamental responsibility to call out what was manifestly wrong. And I want to acknowledge George Newhouse of the National Justice Project as one of the few partners Jumbana could find on the East Coast to take on cases in the Northern Territory at this time. And it has been a little galling to have recently been receiving fundraising requests from human rights organisations now highlighting conditions in the Northern Territory that have worsened because of the very policies that they remained silent about at the time. Leadership isn't how you act when it's safe. It is how you step up when it is hard. And I'm not saying that standing up against power is easy. News Limited came for me just as it came for the others who stood up to Andrew Bolt and spoke out against the intervention. And I acknowledge the strength of the Human Rights Commission when Gillian Triggs was subjected to similar attacks for her principled advocacy on the plight of asylum seekers and the damage caused by offshore detention. But here's the thing, change is hard. It will be resisted. It comes with personal discomfort and sometimes at personal cost and risk. You are not challenging the system if you only speak when it feels safe to do so. I became a lawyer because I wanted to change the world. But when I entered practice, I found I was simply a cog in a wheel processing people through the system. So I went into research to work more closely on law reform. And I came to understand that evidence-based suggestions would always be trumped by ideological-driven approaches and tough-on-crime strategies. So I became deeply interested in creating space for people through broadcasting or filmmaking to tell their stories, to put the human face on what the impact of failed policies is. All of these things I've spoken about, of a criminal justice system and child protection system that fail First Nations people, and the need to speak strongly and fearlessly, are manifestations of the big picture for First Nations, and that is the reality of colonisation. Colonisation is a multifaceted project. It is virulent and aggressive, and its agenda includes the taking of land, the attempt to eradicate culture, the control of bodies, the violation of women, the segregation from colonial society unless assimilated, and the removal of children from their families and communities. These colonial strategies have contemporary manifestations. Despite gains in native title and land rights that have led to recognition and reassertion of custodianship over traditional land, Aboriginal land continues to be affected by the desecration of cultural sites and environmental degradation, particularly by mining. The control of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander bodies continues with the increasing number of Indigenous people in custody. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women continue to be overrepresented in statistics as victims of crime. Exclusion from mainstream institutions and lesser treatment by mainstream services is evident in the socioeconomic data and the inability to close the gap. And the continual increasing rates of removal of Aboriginal children from their families shows that this is an ongoing process. All of these factors are evidence of a clear continuum between historic colonial assimilationist policies and contemporary activities of the state. For First Nations, the system is broken. It was broken when the first colonists arrived in 1788 and used the human fodder from their overflowing prisons to colonise First Nations land here. I found it helpful to remember the historic role of the legal system and the police force in the project of colonisation, and to understand that there has never been a point where there has been a conscious attempt to change that underlying agenda. The overrepresentation of our women, children and men within the criminal justice system confirms that the colonial project is ongoing. The increasing rates of the number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in out-of-home care show that the colonial project has not altered, despite the recommendations of the Bringing Them Home report. It is a system that is also broken. What I have come to learn is that the system will never be fixed with tinkering around the edges by putting more First Nations people within it as lawyers, judges, court officers, police officers. As Gary Foley recently noted, we have never had so many lawyers and never had so many of our people in prison. Ultimately, we need to start afresh. Departments of child protection need to be replaced by empowered community-controlled organisations and true self-determination. Child prisons and juvenile detention centres replaced with treatment that respects the humanity and vulnerability of children and strengthens families and communities, and work towards abolishing incarceration as a way of punishing and controlling. Crimes of poverty should not be punished by imprisonment. Addiction should not be punished by imprisonment. Mental illness should not be punished by imprisonment. None of this should be radical. First Nations people are the world's oldest living culture, and we did not have a prison on this country until 1788, nor did we have a Department of Child Protection. Instead, we had a kinship system that meant everyone had a relationship with everyone else, which meant obligation to one another and to the environment. There was no need for prisons, there was no need for orphanages, there was no homelessness. Turns out this was a sustainable system for over 80,000 years. When Jumbana Research worked recently with the Victorian community on the Aboriginal Justice Agreement 4, the community had a long-term vision of an Aboriginal community-controlled justice system. It included Indigenous control over the determination of the goals and aspirations of that system, the allocation of resources, the setting of policy and programs, for the Victorian government as it applies to Aboriginal people. Developing a legislative agenda and holding government accountable against benchmarks set by the Aboriginal community. What, one participant asked, would self-determination look like without the mainstream legal service? Justice reinvestment imagines redirecting effort towards prevention, and similarly, though some might bristle at the language, defund the police is about redirecting resources towards addressing underlying issues that lead to criminal offending, like mental illness. Colonial law long ago was used by the British to justify their colonisation of Australia. And while the doctrine of terra nullius was overturned in 1992 by the Mabo case, Australia has yet to challenge a more deeply ingrained psychological terra nullius. While more willing to perform welcomes to country and acknowledgements of country, to embrace National Reconciliation Week and NAIDOC weeks, to hang Aboriginal art, these are only a superficial embrace of First Nations perspectives and worldviews, unless coupled with true systemic change and tangible outcomes. In this framework, the failure to implement recommendations of the Royal Commission is not a failure of the system to appropriately deal with an Aboriginal problem, but a complacency about changing the system itself and an indifference to the consequences the status quo is producing. Indigenous people are problematised. We are seen as a problem within the system that needs to be fixed. In fact, it is the system that is the problem and in need of repair. Representation, truth-telling and treaty offer potential pathways to this deeper change, but self-determination must be its guiding principle. The true challenge is the extent to which the system is willing to shift power and to see such a change as a positive rather than a negative. So my message is to use your voice to support the work of grassroots campaigns like Raise the Age, like Family Matters, like the petition from the Bowraville families, like the campaign being led by Karen Isles for police to have a duty of care, like the campaign to close the Dondale Youth Detention Centre. Understand that our legal system and child protection systems have not broken their projects of colonisation. Instead, dream of ways to change that, to truly change its purpose, not just tinker around the edges in attempts to ameliorate its negative impacts. Support the concept of self-determination and the leadership of our community-controlled sector. And we must support and honour our elders who continue to work tirelessly. Look at Linda Burney leading on the Voice to Parliament and Pat Turner leading the Coalition of Peaks and demanding a seat at the table in Closing the Gap. Use your privilege to speak for others when they can't. Be brave. More importantly, use your privilege to create space for those who are being silenced so that they can tell their story in their own words with their own voice. And when they speak, we should listen and listen deeply. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Behrendt. Human Rights Medal winner from 2021. That was an outstanding Human Rights Day oration. Thank you. We're now moving to the award segment of the evening. And so I'll hand the baton on to Naz Campanella to start the ball rolling in that department. Thank you, Naz.
Thank you, Professor Croucher, and also thank you to Professor Behrendt too. I'm overwhelmed by that incredible oration. Thank you. And I know that I'm not alone in saying that in this room. Thank you. And it is time to find out who the recipients and the winners are. So over the next 40 minutes, we'll be introduced to some of the outstanding work that our finalists have been doing to advocate for the rights of a diverse range of people and communities right across Australia. The work we'll highlight in our upcoming video presentations provides just a glimpse of the impact these incredible people are having each and every day. But before we do any of that, And to give us a little bit of context about the awards, I'd now like to welcome the Chief Executive of the Australian Human Rights Commission, Leanne Smith, and Australia's Disability Discrimination Commissioner, Dr. Ben Gauntlet, to come to the stage, please.
Thank you, Naz, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to shift gears for a moment and take you all back to the year 1987. The year United States President Ronald Reagan delivered his famous speech on German unification at the Berlin Wall. The Black Monday stock market crash that set the stage for the recession we had to have. The average price of a house in Australia was around $80,000. The Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, was the first woman to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And last but not least, the Australian Human Rights Commission presented Australia's first ever Human Rights Awards.
The focus of these first awards was recognising human rights achievements in the fields of film, television, and literature. Over the years, award categories were adapted to better align with Australia's ever-changing human rights landscape. Today, 36 years later, the Human Rights Awards recognise, showcase, and celebrate the work and achievements of human rights advocates working right across Australia in all kinds of sectors and in many different circumstances. In particular, these awards provide Australia with an opportunity to honour our often unsung heroes of human rights. Tonight, we get to shine a light on the extraordinary work of ordinary people who often go unrecognised for their efforts in protecting and promoting human rights in Australia.
The 19 finalists we're honouring tonight were chosen by our judging panels from over 150 nominations across 4 categories. This was one of the strongest responses for nominations in the history of awards, and we were so delighted after 3 years of not being able to get together to hold them. In choosing the finalists in each of our categories, our independent judging panels considered the nominees' achievements in the previous 12 months, as well as their ongoing contribution to the advancement of human rights. To be eligible for consideration, nominees had to have made an outstanding contribution to the promotion and protection of human rights in Australia in at least one of the following areas: taking action to overcome discrimination or infringements of human rights, encouraging greater harmony between people of different race, sex, sexuality, gender, age, or ethnic origin, enhancing the rights of First Nations people and communities, promoting equal opportunity for people with a disability, and increasing awareness of issues of injustice or inequality.
Our judging panels then weighed up the work and achievements of all nominees against a range of criteria to eventually settle on the 19 finalists we're honouring tonight, as well as ultimately our 4 award recipients.
The courage, empathy, compassion, and determination that these people and organisations bring to their work makes each and every one of them a true champion of human rights. We congratulate all of them on their selection as finalists and note that no matter what the outcome of tonight's awards, every one of them deserves our admiration and our gratitude for making a real difference in the lives of the people and the communities that they serve.
We'll find out more about each of our finalists as we progress through the evening. But to start with, let's introduce you to the finalists for this year's Law Award.
First Nation women to access justice can be a very difficult time. It can be hard understanding the legal system. So our role within the First Nations women's team is to create a pathway that's going to be very culturally safe and get women to their appropriate outcomes they're looking for regarding their families or for their personal selves. Being shortlisted for the Human Rights Award on work that we've done here at Women's Legal and specifically with our First Nations client is extremely a big honour for the organisation, really. Certainly the work that's gone into it and to be recognised is really big. And I myself, as an employee here at Women's Legal, and working with our lawyers, like to commend them on the work that they've done with our clients and what we've all contributed on one level or another in supporting the issues that impact our lives, our families, to recognition on an international level is pretty big.
Human rights are the basic ingredients that we all need to lead a decent, dignified life. My career has been driven by trying to achieve human rights for those people and communities whose rights have been at risk. And so what really motivates me is using my skills, my experience, and my privilege to bring about positive social change. Across my 20-year career, I've worked on a really wide range of human rights issues, from democratic freedoms and the rights of people to gather together and protest, to rights in the criminal justice system, for example, stopping governments from locking up children in inhumane conditions in adult jails, to the rights of refugees and people seeking asylum and working with refugee families to secure their freedom from detention. Through that career, there's a common thread, which is advocating for systemic change for good, changes to laws and policies so that our legal systems uphold human rights.
Global displacement is now at record highs. As climate change brings disasters on steroids, we're likely to see more and more people on the move. Just this year, floods in Pakistan displaced 30 million people, while closer to home, communities in New South Wales and Queensland have been evacuated over and over again. Real-world solutions to displacement can't be developed without deep, evidence-based long-term thinking. I've been able to bring my scholarly expertise to bear on a range of important international processes. For instance, I advised the UN Refugee Agency on its global strategy on climate-related displacement. I was consulted by the Biden administration on new legal frameworks to address climate-related movement. And I had the privilege of working with Pacific governments and communities to draft the world's first regional framework on climate mobility. My legal analysis has been adopted by courts around the world and the UN Human Rights Committee. Personally, I'm driven by a deep sense of social justice, equity, and the rule of law. I strive to create bridges between scholars, policymakers, civil society, affected communities, and the wider public, so that a range of perspectives and voices is heard.
"2022 marks the 30th anniversary for the Centre. For 30 years, the Centre has been providing direct client legal representation to people with HIV and hepatitis-related legal matters in a client-focused and holistic way. We also provide legal education on HIV and the law and engage in law reform to address systemic problems facing people living with and affected by HIV. When we first opened, the Centre provided bedside wills and early release of superannuation as people with HIV were dying from AIDS. Now, with access to treatment, people with HIV can achieve an undetectable viral load, meaning they no longer transmit HIV to a sexual partner and they have a normal life expectancy. Yet despite this, there is still severe stigma and discrimination towards people living with HIV. There are still laws such as criminal laws and discrimination laws and immigration laws, which negatively impact the lives of people with HIV. And it is for that reason that the Centre continues to do the work 30 years later.
Wow. We'll now find out the winner. If I can ask you just to hold your applause till all the names have been read out. But can I welcome Australia's Human Rights Commissioner, Lorraine Finlay, to present this award, please?
Well, thanks, Naz, and good evening, everyone. As a legal practitioner myself, I'm simply in awe of all of the work that each of our finalists are doing in their specific fields. Congratulations to all of them. The finalists for this year's Law Awards are Hugh de Kretzer, for over 2 decades of service to law reform, human rights law, and community legal centres. HIV/AIDS Legal Centre, for over 20 years of legal service to people and communities affected by HIV/AIDS. Scientia Professor Jane McAdam, AO, for over 10 years of internationally renowned scholarship and advocacy in relation to refugee law and forced migration, particularly her leadership on legal responses to climate-related displacement. And the New South Wales Women's Legal Service First Nations program, for close to 20 years of providing pioneering and culturally safe legal services for First Nations women, including an historic recent case in the European Court of Human Rights. And the award recipient is Scientia Professor Jane McAdam, AO.
Well, thank you so much. This really is an honour. Sometimes you do know in secret that you're the winner, but I assure you I did not. And apologies for the mask lines on my face that you can probably see on the screen. This really is a shared honour, and I want to pay tribute to all the fellow finalists who are remarkable people, remarkable organisations, tending to the rights of people whose voices often go unheard, whose rights often go unnoticed. I would also like to thank the Australian Human Rights Commission for making the awards possible for so many years and for shedding light on the work that extraordinary people are doing around the country. I'd particularly like to acknowledge my colleagues at the Caldor Centre for International Refugee Law, who work tirelessly day in, day out to support and ensure the protection of refugees and other displaced people around the world. Globally, there are now more than 100 million people who've been forced from their homes, whether as a result of persecution, human rights violations, disasters, the impacts of climate change, and of course, conflict. And we know that many of those causes are interrelated and compounding. I would like to thank Andrew and Renata Caldor, who are here tonight, for their ongoing support and encouragement for the centre they founded almost 10 years ago now, and to the UNSW Law faculty, the 3 deans that I've had the privilege of working with, Andrew Lynch, who's here tonight, and before him, George Williams and David Dixon. They provide enormous encouragement, support and championing of the work that we do, and without them, what we do would not be possible. And finally, I'd like to thank everybody in the refugee and human rights ecosystem. It's a wonderful, collaborative, collegial group of people, and we each play a particular role and support each other in the work that we do. And if I could single out, of course, those with lived experience of displacement and affected communities who trust us to share their stories, their experience, their knowledge, and their recommendations. And it's through these insights that our own work becomes better informed and more relevant. So thank you once again. It's an enormous honour.
Congratulations, Scientia Professor Jane McAdam, AO, and thank you, Commissioner Finlay, for that. Our next category is the Community Award, and let's take a little look at why they do what they do.
What motivates us to do what we do every day is really the power of fashion. We use fashion, clothes, and fake merch with a message to unite people, and we unite people around a cause that supports Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And the Free the Flag is a great example of where we actually created social change in this country through fashion and advocacy. We're a social enterprise, so we're profit for purpose, and the fact that we get to self-determine the work we do every day and use our voice and our brand to create social change is, as previous health professionals, we never thought that we could achieve what we can through business and let alone fashion.
Yeah, and the independence in it is really incredible. And as Laura said, being profit for purpose means that we get to independently support the work of the Closing the Gaps Foundation as well. So the foundation works to add years to Aboriginal people's lives, and he's doing some really brilliant stuff right across the country, and especially here in what we now call Victoria.
Our mission is to change people's perception about disability and employment and to disrupt disability employment in Australia. We believe in a world that is inclusive and in a world that values diversity. Hotel Etico is fundamentally based on the principles stated in Article 23 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where work is a right for everyone. And we believe that not only is work a human right, but it is a key to inclusion, to self-fulfillment dependence. Through our work, we support young people with disability develop a career and independent living skills. We change people's perceptions about disability and employment, and we support employers develop more inclusive employment practices. We're based in the Blue Mountains, and over the next 10 years, we will be present in every state and territory in Australia.
Our work was driven by a burning sense of injustice about the way our friends were treated.
When Nadis and Priya were taken from Billa, we know we had to stand up and fight for them.
As we learnt about the punitive refugee policy that kept them locked up and far away from their home in Billa, we discovered that their experience was the rule and not the exception.
As we shared Nadez and Priya's story, their experiences jolted the conscience of many Australians.
And now that they're home in Billa, we've turned our attention to others who are in similar situations.
We believe that Australia has lost its way with how it treats people who were arrived by sea. This must change.
Seeking asylum is a fundamental human right.
The Home to Billow campaign changed the conversation about people who seek asylum by sea, and this needs to continue.
We want to see permanent protection for those who have sought safety on Australia's shores.
We think that laws that detain, marginalise and punish people who seek asylum need to be changed.
We want people who seek asylum to have work rights, study rights and access to Medicare.
We want Australia, the land of the fair go, to give people who seek asylum a fair go.
A criminal record places a huge barrier to employment and education that often requires work placement. We believe that employment is a right for every individual. Participation in the community is a right for every individual, and also the right to provide for their family and their children. Employment for women with a criminal record is not just a means of earning income and becoming financial independent. What it does for a woman's self-worth and her value, the ability to move forward once the sentence is served, is huge. Success Works advocates to employers for the women that we serve so that they are seen as human first and have these opportunities as human rights.
These finalists, can I please welcome Australia's Age Discrimination Commissioner, the Honourable Dr. Kay Patterson AO, to present this community award, please.
Thank you very much, Naz. I've been presenting the community awards. We missed out because of COVID, but for most of my time as a commissioner, and it warms my heart each time I have the honour of announcing such outstanding people and organisations. Congratulations to all of you who've been nominated. As you know, the finalists for this year's Community Award are Hotel Etico for pioneering first social enterprise hotel providing employment and training for young people with disability. Success Works for providing specialist recruitment support, skills, training and empowerment for women with a criminal record. And Home to Billow for over 4 years of outstanding grassroots advocacy, which famously resulted in the return of a family of Tamil asylum seekers to their home in Billaware in Queensland. And Clothing the Gaps for pioneering an innovative social enterprise that uses fashion to help advance First Nations reconciliation. I have to let you into a secret. The commissioners don't know, we're not involved, so somebody said they didn't know they were going to win it. We don't know who's winning. So it's going to be a great surprise for me when I open the envelope. Thank you. The Community Award winner goes to Hotel Etico.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you very much to the Commission. Thank you very much to the President of the Commission, to everyone, every Commissioner, Ben Ortlett in particular, for the amazing work that you're doing about disability. Thank you to the amazing community that's been supporting us in Mount Victoria and the Blue Mountains, and that's just the beginning. I'd like to acknowledge the amazing vision and work and support of my fellow directors, Tracy Lee Aristidis, John Ackery, and Alex Toselli, who live in Italy. The amazing team, the staff, the amazing, passionate professionals in disability and hospitality that make a difference every day in the life of amazing individuals who see work as their right and see work as their key to independence, to a fulfilling life, to a dignified life, and to a life of inclusion. We transform lives every day. Our trainees are with us for 12 months. They work, they live on site, they interact with the community, they're front and center of our business. They are paid full award wages from day one. They're trained on the job. They have equal pay with everyone, and they're supported throughout the 12 months to achieve their independence and skills that will create their careers, not just jobs, as our Australian of the Year keeps saying, not just jobs, careers and dreams and lives and independence. And then we support them for another 12 months after they leave us to make sure that through our network of hospitality industry employers are employed and maintain their employment for 12 months. We're very proud of the work we do. We want to be everywhere in Australia over the next 10 years. We've started that movement, and we're extremely proud of this acknowledgement. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Congratulations, Hotel Etico, and thank you so much to Commissioner Patterson. Our next category is the Young People's Award. Let's check out what makes them tick in these next set of videos.
My advocacy journey, that I've now been on for almost 5 years, began at a young age when I noticed and became extremely frustrated at the lack of youth representation and engagement, especially for women of colour like myself. I saw the unaddressed institutional challenges that we faced and became even more determined and driven to help advocate for and empower minority groups and individuals who weren't having their voices acted on or heard seriously enough. I've realised that things like legislation and campaigns impact real people and real lives. So if anything, the people that they impact should be represented and have a say to help create genuine positive change that reflects us. Unfortunately, despite Australia's diversity, we still have a long way to go when it comes to achieving equality and representation and removing the various forms of systematic oppression and challenges, especially for women of colour whose identities intersect with other marginalised groups and are disproportionately impacted by other issues and challenges as well.
I believe that every young person and child has the right to feel safe, loved and secure in their lives, and that's why I do what I do. My goals for all the work that I do is to make sure that we are actually bringing a seat to children and young people on the table when it's regarding their lives. They deserve as much of a say in their life and what's happening in their life as the adults around the table. I also do my work to be able to promote the need for change, and especially around ensuring that young people transitioning have the exact same opportunities as their peers. Majority of the time, children and young people enter care through no fault of their own, and it doesn't sit right with me that for a lot of them they're so far behind the start line for their peers and throughout their journey in adulthood. And I'm hoping to bridge the gap. So that's what I do.
What drives me to do my human rights work is purely the fact that it's been passed down from my elders to me, and that I need to keep running that race. I need to take the baton off them and continue the fight and paving the path that they have already worked so hard to pave for us. But it's my community, it's my family, it's my friends, it's the people that feel that they don't have the ability to speak up. It's about empowering them. And making sure that community has the ability for self-determination, that they can feel safe in raising issues without being discriminated against. I'm very passionate about the Indigenous advocacy and Indigenous sector, but also very passionate about agriculture and our farming sector. So I'd love to see the two marry together and some outcomes come from there, from self-determination to culture being more widely accepted in Australia and systems being changed to represent modern Australia and everyone in it.
Together as brother and sister, we advocate for child survivors of family violence to be seen, heard, and supported as victims in their own right. The right of children to be safe is a fundamental human right, but how can that right be protected when kids like us are the invisible and unheard victims of family violence?
As child victims, we are not extensions of our mums, and we don't experience family violence the same way or have the same support needs as her or as each other.
Statistics clearly show that kids who grow up with family violence are much more likely to end up in the criminal justice system as an offender or a victim and to suffer mental health problems. If people start seeing kids as victims in their own right, stepping in and actually protecting the human rights of kids like us, so much will change for kids, for families, and for the community.
I'm continuously blown away, but wow. an incredible group of young people. I'd now like to call on Australia's National Children's Commissioner, Anne Hollins, to present this award, please.
Thanks so much, Naz, and hello everybody, and surely I've got the best job of the night. What creativity and energy and insights are. We don't need any more proof that listening to kids is a really important thing to do. Congratulations to all 5 of these marvellous young people for their exceptional use of the qualities that these qualities that will make a difference in the lives of other people in very special ways. I think we're in very good hands in the future with young people like this. So I'm now going to read you the finalists again for this year's Young People's Award. Simon and Elke for outstanding advocacy and support for child survivors of family violence. Caroline, I think we're meant to be holding claps, but go ahead. Caroline Fletcher for exceptional advocacy for children and young people living in out-of-home care. Amaya Hariga for outstanding work as a youth advocate, creating safe spaces for young people and ensuring their voices are heard on a range of issues. And Shanae Dodd for her passionate First Nations and Pacifica advocacy, as well as her focus on regenerative agriculture and caring for country. So the Young People's Award for 2022, the winner is Caroline Fletcher.
Oh wow, there's a lot of you. I'd like to start by acknowledging all my fellow nominees. All of your work is amazing and inspiring, and you all, I'm lucky to know most of you, and you all inspire me daily. If someone could tell the 15-year-old me, as cliche as it was when she started advocating because she saw a need for change, that she'd be here today, she'd probably tell you lots of other words that I can't use right now. But this goes out to all the young people that are advocating for change. Your voices are heard, and to the adults in the room, you can't make decisions without us, so thank you.
Congratulations, Caroline, and thank you to Commissioner Hollins. We've now come to the final category in our awards tonight, the prestigious Human Rights Medal. It's the 35th Human Rights Medal the Commission has presented. The medal remains the only category from 1987's inaugural event that is still awarded. The first Human Rights Medal winner was Indigenous activist Rose Collis, who was acknowledged for her tireless work in drug and alcohol rehabilitation initiatives for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Other recipients since then have included Fred Hollows, Peter Grester, Dorothy Hoddinott, Ian Thorpe, Jonathan Thurston, the Honourable Peter McClellan, Chrissy Foster, Rosemary Caius, and of course, last year's recipient, Professor Larissa Behrendt. Tonight, one of our 5 finalists will join this esteemed group of heroes. But first, if we can hear a little bit more from these amazing people about the work that they do that has seen them be part of this category tonight.
What drives me to do the work with LGBTIQ+ forcibly displaced people is experience of invisibility. Unfortunately, we still live in a world when 1/3 of this world can kill you and persecute you because of who you are, who you love, and how your body looks like. When you're an LGBTQ person trying to seek safety, often you may face with indifference. We rarely can rely on the support of our ethnic community or LGBTQ+ community because these spaces are still not fully inclusive and supportive of your diversities. This invisibility and indifference can kill. I co-founded Forcibly Displaced People Network because it's amazing power when a community comes together and sharing similar lived experience can create a change. I work with the community to achieve safety and inclusion, that people can live their life with dignity and respect in Australia, to be valued and belong.
Until 12 years ago, I had no idea what life was like for a person with a disability. That's because I had a car accident and sustained a spinal cord injury. I learned very quickly that there are so many challenges in every facet of life. Everything from education to employment to healthcare. During COVID-19, I saw all these challenges becoming exacerbated. I still feel lucky. I still feel lucky to be in the position that I'm in. I still feel lucky to live where I am. But there are so many people in this world going through challenges. And there are so many kids that are facing these challenges as well. I want to see a future where these kids have equitable access to education, employment, healthcare, and all these fundamental things that we take for granted. I want to see a better future for the community of people with disabilities. And that is what drives me to do the work that I do.
I was brought up in a household where my dad fought in the Second World War and my mum dealt with the consequences of that. And what we saw through the lens of my parents was that every day we have a choice about who we're going to be. Every day we have a decision to make about whether we stand up and say we will not put up with that kind of treatment, that we will all do everything we can to make sure that human rights are reality for everybody. That got, I think, wired into me as a very young child, that this is a really important obligation for all of us, and so I'm so privileged that I get the chance in the work that I do and the people that I work with for us to be able to be a part of trying to make a difference. It is really important that we give life to the human right that's about having an adequate standard of living, having adequate housing, making sure that every person, every child has the essentials of life and is able to live a life with dignity and to be treated with respect.
At the moment, I'm sitting on the lands of the Kaurna people in South Australia in Adelaide, sadly where my brother Wayne Fella Morrison died in custody. Wayne was spit-hooded in 2016. He was cuffed by his wrists and his ankles, and he was put face down into the back of a prison transport van with 8 officers inside. During the course of the coronial inquest, my family and community and leaders right across Australia successfully pushed the South Australian government to legislate Fella's Bill, to legislate the statewide ban on spit hoods. While I am so deeply grateful to the Australian Human Rights Commission for choosing me as a finalist for this medal, I know we have such a long way to go with not only banning spit hoods nationally and across the globe, but also with reckoning with torture in Australia and the way that particularly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are being treated in places of incarceration and right across these lands.
It is so honored to nominate as a Human Rights Award, especially in particular that I know that my son has been nominated, Nawid Cina. That's more exciting. It's like a dream of every mother for the son to receive a nomination. And I'm so excited and so happy about this. What drives me to do the work that I do is the suffering of Afghan women in Afghanistan. Through my 26 years of work, that I work so hard to give opportunity for women to learn something, to learn a skill, to become self-sufficient. One human rights outcome that I like to achieve in Afghanistan, and I dream to have it, for Afghan women to be free and to choose what they want to do, to go out without permission, to run their life the way they want, to work equally, to study, go for further education. I want Afghan women to be free.
I don't envy the judging panel at all. Can I please call to the stage again the President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, Emeritus Professor Rosalind Croucher, to present this award, the 2022 Human Rights Medal.
Thank you, Naz, again. What a wonderfully diverse group of people who are all doing such incredible work. I've been deeply moved every moment when we've seen those finalists on the screen. And as we've shared with you this evening, they were the group of the finalists in the biggest field of nominees for these awards that we've had. An extraordinary range of contributions that are inspiring and deeply moving and profoundly overwhelming for the commitment to changing the lives of people, keeping in mind that dignity is the essence of human rights, and it's seen in every one of the finalists that you've seen tonight. The finalists for this year's Human Rights Medal that you have seen on screen just now, to recap: Renee Dixon, for exceptional service to and support for LGBTIQ+ refugees, principally through leading the Forcibly Displaced People Network, Australia's first LGBTIQ+ refugee-led organisation. Renee Dixon. And as this is the big one, our medal, I'm giving an extra emphasis to our finalists. Dr. Cassandra Goldie, for over 20 years of championing the interests of people experiencing poverty, inequality and marginalisation, most recently through her work as CEO of the Australian Council of Social Service. Dr. Cassandra Goldie. Dr. Dinesh Palipana, for outstanding service and achievement as a disability advocate, including co-founding Doctors with Disabilities Australia and advocating for disability rights throughout the COVID pandemic, Dr. Dinesh Palipana. Mahboba Rawi and Nawid Cina, for exceptional dedication and service to the women and children of Afghanistan through their Australian-based social enterprise, Mahboba's Promise, helping resettle in Australia over 150 vulnerable people, as well as funding schools, health, care services and vocational programs. For Mahboba's Promise, Mahboba Rawi and Nawid Cina, mum and son. And the last to be mentioned in our outstanding group of finalists, Latoya Aroha-Rule, for outstanding advocacy in relation to First Nations social justice and efforts to ban spithoods in Australian detention settings. Latoya Aroha-Rule. And the winner of the 2022 Human Rights Medal Mahboba Rawi and Nawid Cina.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God, thank you. Thank you. Oh my God. Oh my God, I can't breathe. Oh God, I can't breathe. It's okay. It's okay now. Don't cut me down. It just, okay, we got 2 minutes for 2 persons. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum means peace be with you all. First, I like to thank our creation, Almighty God, for giving us opportunity to be here and to be alive, to be servant for His humanity. And I like to thank Australian Human Rights Commission and, oh my God, what should I say? President of Human Rights Commission in Leon, and each and every one of you working with the Commission, Australian Commission, all my colleagues sit there. Both of my sisters, you both get out, come here, please. And I dedicate this to each and every one of women in Afghanistan. And each and every one of women in my second country, Australia. And to my beautiful mom, my daughter, who's Tamana, she's not here. She left me for the husband, gone to Perth. And my grandson, Ali, and I miss them all. I leave it to my beloved sons. So this is the best award that I am receiving together with my son. This is dream come true.
We're going to blow the 2 minutes. I'd like to echo the thanks to the Human Rights Commission, to Rosalind, to Leanne. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to all the other finalists. It's an honor to just be in your presence. Thank you to all the Mahbubas from those volunteers, staff who are here, to Sarah Dale, who worked as my twin this year in an evacuation process that moved mountains. We were unable to announce it, so I have to give a little bit of detail behind what this work was. This journey began August 15th last year. It was a mission to save orphans, widows, and staff trapped in Afghanistan, alongside a desperate continuation of our humanitarian work that my mum has been doing for the past 26 years. It's a mission that I came to, that fell in my lap to lead at 25 years old. 17 were evacuated in September, but many were left behind. And in April this year, I led a humanitarian and evacuation mission into Afghanistan to face the evil that I had been confronting in Australia for the past 6 months. When I was there, they told me that a single visa would be a miracle in a system that's deeply broken. By the end of that trip, I had 91 further visas in my hand. And that concludes all the orphans in the 2 orphanages run by Mahboba's Promise, who call my mother their mother. 6 months later, we had evacuated this cohort into Pakistan nearly 1 year after the mission began, and it represents the largest single group of unaccompanied children Australia has evacuated in its history. For me, what this work demonstrates is what happens when grassroots organizations partner and are allowed to work with institutions who hold power. History is achieved. Thank you again to everyone, and I'd like to thank my mum, who showed me what it means to live a life of service, sacrifice, and sincerity, who bled human rights into my body from the moment I was born, and who is a mother of 1,000 and yet was there for me and my sister in every single moment. She's the strongest woman I know, which means she absolutely dominates all aspects of my life. And it's why I try to escape at times. But miracles can happen, especially to the young ones here. Like the first kid I put on that list last year in August, he wasn't granted in that time. I've never gotten emotional when I speak. But he's sitting right here in the crowd right now. And that's why this award isn't just about Afghanistan, it's about Australia, because I think when one's heart is moved to do something good, especially to relate to someone who looks or thinks different, that makes us all better people. I think this makes our society better, and watch what these kids will contribute to our society here. Again, thank you everyone, and Mahboba's Promise has grown. We've outdone ourselves, we got new responsibilities, and so if there's anyone that wants to support us, primarily through your skill sets, come and find us. Come and find us and help us continue our journey for women and children here and in Afghanistan. Thank you so much.
Congratulations to Mahboba's Promise, and thank you again, President Croucher, for presenting that award. I think tonight we have all been moved, we have all been inspired, and I know I definitely have. And I think sometimes it is, while we all sit back and we focus on the work that needs to be done and how grim the picture can look across the world, tonight we have seen that work is being done, and these incredible people, all of our finalists and recipients tonight, are doing amazing work. And please join with me again in giving them all a round of applause, because as Commissioner Holland said, the future is in very good hands. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight at UTS and joining us online. We look forward to seeing you again next year for another wonderful celebration of human rights heroes. And if Professor Behrendt and all of our finalists could please come to the stage for a photo opportunity. I promise it won't take long, but we do need to do that. And thank you for having me as your MC for this evening. It has been an absolute privilege to share the space with so many wonderful people tonight. Thank you. Have a safe and wonderful evening.